You may be as comfortable with your camera as you are with your oldest friends. Learned how to take beautiful pictures. In fact, your eye has been trained to constantly look for interesting photographs. Making photographs is really part process. Until now, you've concentrated on using all the tools available to you to take the kinds of pictures that make you feel proud. But you've left 2/3 of the process to someone else. That is developing your film and printing your pictures. Leaving developing and printing to someone else is fine for photographers, but not for me. There's a whole world of creative techniques you can use in the darkroom. No one else can guess your feelings, your emotions, your attitude, all the things you want your finished print to say. To really achieve these things, you've got to get into the darkroom yourself. And that's where we're going in this videotape. Hi, I'm Brian Ratty, and I'll be your host as we explore the fascinating world of the darkroom. Having your own darkroom or working in a darkroom is really easy, and most importantly, it's quite enjoyable. There are so many creative methods and techniques that you can learn. Over the years, I've made literally thousands of different black and white and color prints from over hundreds of different negatives. What never ceases to amaze me is how enjoyable and challenging it is every time. If you build your own darkroom environment, it can cost you from as little as $300 to over $3,000. Darkrooms can be as small as a closet or as large as a spare room. It's really up to you. Later on in this videotape, I'll show you in detail how to process film, make proof sheets, and enlargements. Right now, though, I want to illustrate just how easy it is to make an 8x10 black and white print. I've selected a normal negative from my negative file. This negative was exposed and processed correctly. Later on, I'll show you how you can identify a good normal negative. First, I'll place it in the enlarger. Previously, I've made a test strip, so I know what my basic exposure is going to be. I'll set my enlarger lens to f16, my timer to 12 seconds, and I'll go to my focus light. At this point, the rest of the procedure is done under safe light conditions. First, I want to check my focus. Looks good and sharp to me. Now I will go to the time mode of my timer, take a piece of photographic paper, place it in the easel, let the enlarger settle down, and make my print. First, I'll take my exposed paper, immerse it in a solution called a developer. I will develop my print through the recommended time, rocking the tray back and forth. When the print is fully developed, I'll remove it from the developer and submerge it in the stop bath solution. The stop bath solution will stop the developing process, and it only takes a few seconds. Then I'll remove the print from the stop bath solution and place it in a solution called a fixer. The fixer makes the print no longer sensitive to white light, therefore I can turn on the lights and view my handiwork. After a few minutes in the fixing solution, I'll thoroughly wash and dry my print. It's really quite that simple. A few minutes from start to finish. Developing your own darkroom skills will make you even a better photographer. More importantly, you'll find a dramatic sense of accomplishment, knowing that the finished print is truly yours. To really get the most out of this videotape,
I suggest that you watch each chapter in its entirety. Then review each section again, pausing the tape and taking notes whenever necessary. After that, you can refer back to the tape as many times as you think necessary. Okay, let's get started. When you take a moment to really study the photographic work of the truly great photographers, you'll find how they use the black and white medium to its fullest. In fact, to me, there's no finer medium in photography than black and white. A few years ago, most photographers had lost interest in the medium, but today there is a resurgence taking place. Black and white is just plain magic. There are 3 steps to processing black and white photographs. The first step is to develop the film, which will give you the negative you will use to make your print. Next, you'll make a contact print from your negative. The contact print has several purposes. It is used to check the quality of your negatives, as well as to help you select which negative you actually want to print. You will also use the contact print to determine other factors, such as cropping and exposure. The third step is to make the enlargement, which is the final photograph as you want it to be seen. As soon as light enters your camera through the shutter, a photograph is recorded on film. At this point, it's called a latent image, because although it's there, it cannot be seen until the chemicals on the film meet another chemical, the developer. The developer turns portions of the film's emulsion to metallic silver in shades of black, gray, and clear, depending on the amount of light recorded on the film. After a certain amount of time, the development process is stopped by immersing the film in a solution called stop bath. As its name implies, this chemical stops the action of the developer. It also rinses the developer off the film so it does not contaminate the next chemical to be used. The final chemical used is fixer. This is a solution that makes the image permanent by washing away any remaining silver halides, those light-sensitive salts used in the emulsions. The fixer also contains a hardening agent to toughen the processed emulsion. Water is then used to wash away the fixer and the film is hung up to dry. The image which now appears on the film will be preserved. When you look at the processed film, you'll see that the dark areas of the image are white or clear, while the light areas of the scene are black. That's why this is called a negative. You will undoubtedly also find infinite shades of gray. Darkrooms come in many sizes and shapes. Some cost thousands of dollars, while others only a few hundred. In the early days of photography, darkrooms were tents that were carried on location. Today, a darkroom can be as small as a spare closet. The only prerequisite to a darkroom is just as the name implies, a room that can be made totally dark. Let's talk about your darkroom layout. If you aren't lucky enough to have an extra room in your home that can be completely converted into a permanent darkroom, don't despair. There is still probably some part of your home in which you can improvise a darkroom. If you have a second bathroom or live alone and don't mind the inconvenience of obstructing the main one, this is an ideal place to improvise a darkroom. Bathrooms have ample electrical power supplies, running water, and are usually fairly simple to make dark. An added attraction of this kind of darkroom is that the bathrooms are usually equipped with some form of ventilation. For many of the same reasons, kitchens can also make adequate improvised darkrooms. There are a couple of extra concerns though. For instance, the kitchen is often a very high traffic area, so it may be a little inconvenient. There are often more windows and doors in a kitchen, so it may be difficult to make it light tight. Access to running water is ideal, but not critical in an improvised darkroom. By the time film or prints need to be washed, they can be exposed to normal room light. So you don't have to have running water. You can carry them from one room to the other for the final wash. For this reason, you may be able to create a darkroom in a walk-in style closet. Since closets are typically quite small, a closet darkroom will take some careful planning. I want to take a moment and talk about cleanliness. There is nothing more telling of amateur photographic work than having dirty prints made from dirty negatives. This all starts in a dirty darkroom. Dust, dirt, and smoke are all enemies to your darkroom. Be neat, clean, and tidy, and your work will look much more professional. You should not allow smoking in your darkroom, and you should vacuum rather than dust with a brush. Anytime you clean the room thoroughly, you should wait a while before working with negatives and prints, so the dust you stirred up has a chance to settle. Improvising a darkroom in a room that serves a second purpose suits some photographers quite well. Although if you have an adequate spare room, you'll probably prefer to build a permanent darkroom. Again, the room must be able to be light tight, should have proper ventilation, and should be able to be kept at a reasonable temperature. You are now ready to look at the layout of your room. There are many ways to design your darkroom, but you should keep in mind two important considerations. The first consideration is the positioning of the wet side and the dry side. The wet side is the area where your chemicals are kept and used. Your sink will be located on the wet side. In other words, all the parts of the darkroom process, which happen with wet film or prints, are done on the wet side. The dry side will have your enlarger, your photographic paper, your files, and all your equipment for cropping, retouching, and mounting. It is extremely important that your tools on the dry side stay dry. Ideally, the wet side and the dry side will be found on two completely separate benches. Choosing the right equipment for your darkroom is important in your success. Purchasing your equipment from a specialized photographic dealer is always your best decision. Equipment especially designed for the darkroom will give you the best results. You'll need a good quality safe light. The most critical aspect of a safe light is that there's no danger of the light from it fogging your print paper, yet still giving you enough light to see by. The best safe lights have a flat filter so that their light is fairly directional. The light should be positioned so that it is not directly into your eyes. And your safe light should be operated by a pull string so that it can be turned on and off with wet hands. The most important and probably the most expensive piece of equipment in your darkroom will be the enlarger. Although the design of different enlargers can vary slightly, all enlargers perform the same basic function. They project an image onto a piece of light-sensitive paper to produce a print. Every enlarger has a light source, some way to direct the light, a carrier that holds the negative in place, and a lens to focus the image. All these elements are combined into a unit called the enlarger head. The enlarger head is mounted on a column so that it can be moved up and down to change the size of the image. The rigid column is mounted on a baseboard. This gives it stability and gives you a surface where you can place the photographic paper onto the enlarging easel. There are two different enlarger systems used to provide an even amount of light across the surface of the negative. These are the condenser system and the diffuser system. The size of the image you can project with your enlarger depends not only on the distance from the enlarger head to the baseboard, but also on the focal length of the enlarger lens. The negative carrier must perform several functions. It must hold the negative flat and move into place without the possibility of scratching the negative. It should be dust-free, light-tight, and should not crop too much of the negative as it's held into place. There are two designs for negative carriers, with and without glass. While glass carriers are very good for holding the negative perfectly flat, there are a couple of potential problems. It's very easy for the glass in the carrier to become scratched or trap dust, which might show in your final print. It can also distort the image if the right type of optical glass is not used. Most photographers use glassless negative carriers. These can be made out of metal, plastic, or even black cardboard. One important thing to make sure is that your carrier holds your negative as flat as possible without cropping too much of the image area, and that the negative carrier easily fits into your enlarger. Your enlarger must produce sharp prints. If the enlarger head is not completely free of vibrations, your prints will undoubtedly be blurred. So it's important that your enlarger has a very stable column. Whenever your enlarger is not being used, it should be covered. The lens should be kept clean with lens tissue or a soft blower brush. Check for dust on the condensers with a soft brush. Enlarging easels, also known as masking frames or printing frames, are used to hold a piece of photographic paper in place while projecting an image. There are two basic designs of these easels. The first type of easels gives a white border around your print. A second type of easel gives you a borderless print. The print is held in place either by friction or a sticky surface on the easel. To process your exposed film into negatives, you'll need a couple pieces of equipment. First, the film must be taken from its cassette and loaded onto a reel. Reels are designed to hold the film apart so the chemicals can move freely all the way through the exposed film. Because of their proven durability, most photographers prefer the non-adjustable stainless steel reels. You'll also need a development tank. These tanks are available in both plastic and stainless steel. Some stainless steel tanks have plastic lids, which form a tighter seal than the stainless steel lids. This is important when you're agitating the tank during the development process so that the chemicals don't leak out. There are also available a range of sizes from 1 to 14 reels. Most photographers find a 2-reel tank works best for their needs. Whenever developing or printing in the darkroom, timing is everything. So an adequate timer for the darkroom is critical. An inexpensive clock timer is probably good enough for processing film and prints, as long as the dial is large enough and clear enough to be seen under safe light conditions. However, when using the enlarger, your timing needs need to be precise. For this reason, an electric timer, which can be set to turn the enlarger on and off, is preferred. Make sure the timer you choose for enlarging can be operated by a light touch. Your enlarger timer should be able to be set for as short as 1 second and up to a minimum of 100 seconds. No matter how sharp or crisp your original negative, the image projected from your enlarger must be equally focused for a high-quality print. For this reason, a focusing magnifier can become an important tool. You may be able to achieve accurate focus with the naked eye, assuming you have a very accurate vision and are not as old as I am, but with all the designs of focusing magnifiers available to you, it may be beneficial to have a little help. Focusing magnifiers reflect some of the light from the enlarger to an eyepiece. In turn, it magnifies the reflected image. The magnifier sits on the same surface on which you will be printing and focuses on that plane. For very large prints, a magnifier is essential. Developing prints is done in trays. The most common and practical material for trays is thick gauge plastic. Stainless steel trays are virtually indestructible, but their cost may be too high for the amateur photographer. You should use trays one size larger than the largest print you'll be making. This gives you plenty of room to grip the print with tongs. Another good suggestion is to use different colored trays for each solution used. This will help you keep track of the different solutions. Always use the same tray with the same solution. Most manufacturers sell different colored trays in groups of 3 for just this purpose. The temperature of the developing solution is extremely critical and important that it be kept at a constant level. For this reason, you'll need a thermometer. There are 3 types of photographic thermometers: a glass tube filled with mercury or alcohol, a metal tube with a dial and a pointer, and an electronic thermometer with a digital readout. No matter which thermometer you choose, avoid temptation to use a stirring rod. Thermometers are very fragile and should be handled with care. Washing prints and negatives is essential if you want them to last. Some photographers have been known to be a little careless with this step. If prints and negatives are not completely washed of all the residue chemicals, a couple of problems occur. First of all, over time, the chemicals left on the prints and negatives will cause them to deteriorate, and they will contaminate the other prints and negatives they come into contact with. To eliminate these problems, a print washer is very important. The key to a good print washing is making sure that the prints in the wash do not come in contact with each other, and that the water is constantly circulating and being changed. When you buy a print washer, it is important that you choose one that is bigger than the largest size print you'll be making regularly. We've talked a little bit about darkroom safety and cleanliness. These are very important points and worth mentioning again. The essential requirement of your darkroom's electrical systems are that it is grounded and the load on the circuits must not exceed the capacity of the wiring. If you install your own wiring, take great care that your electrical lines are not near water pipes or taps that could leak water. Whenever you're in the darkroom and you're getting ready to go to work in the dark, take a look around the room to make sure it's safe. Close any open cupboards where you might bang your head. Put knives and blades away. Don't have any materials on the edge of the counters that could be knocked off. Put bottles of chemicals away. Don't leave them on the floor where you could kick them. Remember, any hazard in the light is much worse under low light or no light conditions. Let's look now at the actual chemicals you'll be using in black and white film developing and print processing. Photographic chemicals can be purchased in 2 forms, powdered or liquid. Most chemicals must be mixed with water in order to be used. After initially mixing the chemicals with water, your chemicals are either stock solutions or working strength solutions. It is very important that you learn the difference. There are 2 other terms you should become familiar with in using your chemicals. They are the one-shot developer and the replenishment developer. Your film package will show you the different development times, whether you use the developer diluted or undiluted. Most photographers choose to dilute the developer with water, then discard it after use. This is called one-shot. Using the developer undiluted means you can return it to the bottle after use. But you'll have to keep a record of the number of rolls of film developed, and you'll have to use a separate solution to replenish the developer. Without replenishment, undiluted developer will lose its strength and give you bad results. Chemicals at working strength don't last very long. Some last a month, but others only are good for as little as 1 day in an open tray. Since you can reuse your working strength stop bath and fixer, it's important to pour them back in the bottle after use. Stop bath stored in a container has an indefinite shelf life. Left in a tray, stop bath will go bad in a day. Working strength fixer will last 2 months in a full container, 1 month in a half full container, but only 1 week in an open tray. Working strength developer will only last a month, but film developer at stock strength will be good for 3 to 6 months, depending on whether or not the container is full. Working strength paper developer is only good for 1 day, while at stock strength it will be good for 2 to 6 months. For this reason, you can see that it's important not only to mix only as much strength developer as you're going to use at any one time, but it's also very important to date the chemicals when you mix them to stock strength. When mixing chemicals, water temperature is very important, so you'll need your thermometer handy. You'll also need a stirring rod, rubber gloves, plastic funnel, mixing jugs for each chemical, and a graduated measuring cylinder, and of course your storage container. When mixing chemicals, always add the chemical to the water, not the other way around. This is very important, especially with chemicals that contain acids. Before you get started, make sure that you have thoroughly washed the containers and measuring utensils. You can use ordinary household detergent to clean them, but nothing stronger. Measure the correct amount of water into a graduated measuring cylinder, just slightly larger than the finished solution. Check the water temperature. Add hot or cold water to bring it to correct temperature. Next, pour the correct amount of chemicals into the water and stir until it's dissolved. If you're using powdered chemicals, add the contents of each package in specific order according to the directions. Stir the solution gently at all times, waiting until each chemical is completely dissolved before adding the next. If you're not using the solution immediately, pour the contents into a storage container. Place the funnel in the neck of the container and slowly pour the solution in. Since oxygen has a reaction with chemicals and shortens their shelf life, try to fill the container to the top. Close the lid tightly. Label the bottle using a waterproof marker. You can either write directly on the bottle or on a piece of adhesive tape. Remember to thoroughly wash your utensils after every use. Never reuse the same utensils to mix another chemical without thoroughly washing. Use funnels whenever you want to pour chemicals from one container to another to avoid splashing. Drip trays under chemical containers will protect against chemical spills. With all your chemicals mixed, you're ready to develop some film. The first step is to load your exposed film onto a reel. For the purpose of this demonstration, I'll be using an outdated canister of film, which I'll load in the light so that you can see the procedure. This is a good way for you to practice too, but remember, film loading is always done in complete darkness. Make sure that your tools you'll need for film loading, such as scissors and cassette opener, are handy. It's a good idea to hang them from a string attached to your workbench so that you'll always know where they are. Your first step is to prepare the film. Let's start with 35mm film. If the tongue of the film is still sticking out of the cassette, you can cut off the tongue with the light still on. If the tongue has been wound inside the cassette, you'll have to cut it by feel in the dark. As soon as the film is loaded, you'll tear the film away from the cassette spool. To use a metal reel, hold the film in one hand and the reel in the other. At the center of the reel, you'll find a sort of clip. Keep the film slightly bowed and slip the film into the clip. Clips on metal reels will vary slightly from manufacturer to manufacturer, so make sure you know how to insert the film before you go into total darkness. Next, keeping a slight bow in the film, hold the edges of the film with your thumb and forefinger and rotate the reel away from the film with your other hand. As the edges of the film are released, the film will slot into the reel tracks, which keeps the surface of the film apart. One trick that I do is to run my forefinger around the film after it's been loaded to check for any buckles. With your film completely wound onto the reel, you will now insert the reel into your film development tank and screw on the light-tight lid. Using your piece of outdated film, it's a good idea to try loading your reel several times in the light. Then, still using your test film, load it in the dark. Turn on the lights and see how you did. It may take a few attempts to get the feel for it, but better that you do it wrong with test film than with those important shots you've already taken. With the film loaded into the tank, you can now safely turn on the house lights to process the film. First, prepare the chemicals you'll use. Make sure they're ready to go in the correct amounts. Check the temperatures carefully. It's a good idea to put all 3 beakers of chemicals in a tub of water at 68 degrees. This is called a water bath and will help you maintain accurate processing temperatures. Make sure the chemicals are kept in the order they are to be used: developer, stop bath, and fix, to avoid confusion during processing. Remove the watertight lid on the top of the development tank and pour in the developer. Pour the solution quickly, but with an even flow to avoid air bubbles. As soon as the developer is in the tank, turn the timer on, replace the lid, and give a firm rap on the bench. This will dislodge any air bubbles that may have settled on the film. Do this every time a solution is added. During the development process, you will agitate the tank according to the instructions on the particular developing solution you've purchased. This will ensure that fresh developer reaches all parts of the film. You may be instructed to invert the tank, rock it from side to side, or twist. The instructions with the developer you use will also tell you how long to agitate the tank. It will probably be constant agitation through the first 30 seconds, and then 5 seconds or more for every 30 seconds. When you are not agitating the tank, place it in the water bath to maintain development temperature. When the timer rings, remove the cap and pour the developer into the sink if you're using a one-shot developer. If you're using an undiluted developer, pour it back into the bottle. Now immediately add the stop bath solution. Remember to wrap the tank on the bench again to loosen any air bubbles. Agitate the tank for 30 seconds and then let it sit for 15 seconds. When the time is up, use a clean funnel to pour the stop bath solution back into its container. Stop bath can be reused until it changes color. Pour the fixer into the tank and set your timer. Agitate constantly for the first 30 seconds, then agitate for 5 seconds each minute until the timer rings. When the fixer is halfway completed, you can expose the film to light. You should open the tank and check to see that the milkiness has cleared and that the film is almost black. Continue to fix. When the timer rings, pour the fixer back into its storage container. The final step is to wash the film. You'll be using water directly from the tap, but it's important not to shock the film with very cold water. Check that the water is warm before adding it to the tank. Take the hose attached to the water faucet. When the water reaches the correct temperature, push the end of the hose down into the tank in the center of the reel. Let the water rinse for the recommended time. When the time is up, turn off the tap, but do not drain the water. Add the recommended amount of wetting agent, such as Kodak's PhotoFlow. Shake the tank for 30 seconds. Then continue to shake the tank upside down to allow the water to run down the drain. Take the reel of film from the tank and attach a film clip to the end. Carefully unroll the film from the reel. Hang the film clip from a drying line. Attach another film clip to the other end of the film to prevent the film from curling as it dries. Dry the film in a dust-free area away from direct heat. As soon as the film is dry, cut it into strips to fit into a negative sheet. You can scratch the film if you attempt to roll it for storage. Now let's see how we've done. You'll need a magnifying glass, a light-colored work area, and a bright light. Take a good long look at the negatives. A good negative will show a full range of tones from dark to light. The deepest shadow area of your shot should look as clear as an unexposed film. You should find good detail throughout the image, and you should have a vast range of grays. Examine the negative for marks and scratches. Remember, there's no substitute for a good negative. Mediocre prints often come from weak or poor quality negatives. So take care to know what you're looking for in a quality negative, and strive for that each time you develop film. When you examine your negative, you'll see that one side is shiny, that's the base side. The other side, which is dull, is the emulsion side. As we move into the next chapter, printing, keep this in mind, as we always make prints with the emulsion side of the film to the emulsion side of our photographic paper. As you've already learned, black and white processing is a fairly simple procedure. There is a real thrill in seeing your film in negative form for the first time. But believe me, it's nothing compared to actually seeing a print of your work appearing in a tray of chemicals. You can examine the negative image for hours, but there still may be things that you're unsure of until you see the image in positive form. Instead of leaping ahead and making an 11 by 14 enlargement, you'll want to make a contact proof of your negatives to see exactly what you got to work with. Contact proofs are made by placing the negatives on a light-sensitive photographic paper and exposing the paper to light. Again, you'll have a latent image, and a three-step process must be performed to make the final image. The paper is first immersed in a developer. This developer is different than the chemicals used to develop the negative. The paper is then placed in a stop bath, then a fixer, and finally washed thoroughly to remove all the chemicals and hung up to dry. You will now see a positive image on your contact sheet in black, white, and shades of gray. To make a full-size photographic print, an enlarger is used. Enlargers project the negative image in almost any size onto a piece of photographic paper. The exact process and chemicals used to make your contact sheet are used in developing your enlarged prints. Although making a contact proof involves a process similar to film development, you'll need a different set of equipment and a different kind of developer. Print developer is a completely different solution than film developer. Follow the ratio instructions on the developer and mix it to stock solution. You'll also need working strength stop bath and fixer. Both of these chemicals are the same as you've used for film processing, but usually the fixer is diluted to a 1:2 ratio. The rest of the wet side equipment for print developing includes 3 trays, each of a different color for each solution, print tongs, a stirring rod, a thermometer, a print washer, a squeegee, and a timer. On the dry side, you'll need your negatives, lens cleaning tissue, a piece of black cardboard, printing paper, scissors, a contact printing frame or a piece of heavy glass, safe light, and your enlarger, lens, and timer. Before you begin to make a contact proof, you'll want to set up the wet side. When you make a contact proof, you'll be working under safe light conditions, and I can assure you, you don't want to be mixing chemicals under a safe light. So let's prepare the wet side. Dilute your developer solution as directed and pour into the developer tray. Pour working strength stop bath into your stop bath tray. and working strength fixer into your fix tray. Place your washing tray in or next to the sink. Check the temperature of the developer. 68 degrees is the normal temperature. Check the temperature once again just before you're ready to develop the print and adjust it if necessary. Wash your hands completely after you've set up the wet side. And be sure they are thoroughly dry before you begin your work on the dry side. Now move to the dry side. Clean your contact print frame or piece of glass with lens cleaner or plain water. Set the aperture of your enlarger to f8. Position the frame or piece of glass on the baseboard. Turn the enlarger on and move the head up and down until the cone of light covers an area just larger than the frame or glass. It might be easier for you to see what you're doing with the room lights off. To set the focus, place an empty negative carrier into the enlarger. Project the image onto the baseboard and bring its edges into focus. Check your frame again to be sure it is centered and all four corners are within the light of the enlarger. Turn the enlarger off. Now go to safe light conditions. Take a sheet of printing paper from the box. Place the paper emulsion side up across the printing frame. The emulsion side is the shiny side. Place 1 or 2 strips of negatives on the test paper, shiny side up, and then place the glass on top without disturbing the negatives. To test the exposure for the contact print, you will need your piece of black cardboard. In 5-second intervals, you will start covering sections of the test paper. Turn the enlarger light on. After 5 seconds of exposing the entire piece of paper, bring in the cardboard so it covers 1/5 of the strip. After 10 seconds, cover another 1/5. Continue on until you reach 25 seconds and the entire strip is covered. Then turn the enlarger off. This test will tell you which exposure will give you the best contact print. Continue working under safe lights as you move to the wet side. Set your timer for the correct length to develop. Hold your test by the edges and slip it quickly into the developer solution, emulsion side up. Turn the timer on. Rock the developing tray back and forth for the entire development time, which will be about 1 minute. After about 20 or 30 seconds, you'll start to see an image appear. Don't worry if the image looks dark at this point. When the timer rings, take the paper out of the developer solution with your print tongs. Let it drain off. When fully drained, put the print into the stop bath solution. Take care not to let the tongs dip into the stop bath solution because they're now contaminated with developer. Set your timer for 30 seconds. Rock the tray of the stop bath for the full 30 seconds. Using a clean pair of tongs, take the print from the stop bath and let it drain. Now place the print in the fixer. Start the timer for the recommended amount of time, probably about 2 minutes. Rock the tray frequently throughout the fixer stage. You can turn on the room lights after about 30 seconds, but be sure to continue fixing for the full time. When time is up, remove the strip from the fixer with a third pair of tongs. You can now place the strip in a wash tray. Let it wash for about 4 minutes, and then remove the strip and squeegee it dry. Your washing time will be different if you're using anything other than resin-coated paper. Check the manufacturer's instructions for washing time. Let's now examine the test. The best way to tell the correct exposure for your contact print is by looking at the sprocket holes. As you can see, the sprocket holes in this area, which were exposed for 5 seconds, are much darker than the area around them. If you use this time to expose the entire proof, the image would be much too light. Moving along the strip, we see that 10 seconds is still not quite enough. 15 seconds is much better because the sprocket holes are just a little darker than the area around them. This would be a good exposure for your contact print. At the other end of the test, we see that at 25 seconds, the sprocket holes are no longer visible and the image is much too dark. You may decide after looking at the test that 18 seconds would be best. Use the test as a guide to determine what you want to see in the contact print. Now wash your tongs, clean up your spills, dry your hands, and get ready to start all over again. Set your enlarger timer for the correct exposure time according to your test. Go back to safe light conditions and remove a sheet of print paper. Place it in your proof frame if that's what you're using. If not, place it directly on the baseboard. Arrange the negatives in order, shiny side up, on a piece of photographic paper with its shiny side up. Turn on the enlarger. If your timer turns the enlarger off for you, just wait it out. If not, keep careful track of the time so that you can turn the enlarger off yourself. Remove the sheet of paper from the frame or from underneath the glass and develop the print in exactly the same way you did for the first test. Let's review those. The first step is the developer. You will leave the paper in the developer for about 1 minute, agitating the tray the entire time. Next, you'll place the print in the stop bath. Rock the tray for a full 30 seconds your print's in the stop bath. Move the print into the fixer tray and rock the tray frequently throughout the fixing stage. Wash the print for about 4 minutes, then squeegee the water off and allow the print to dry. Your contact proof is useful in determining what images you'll want to print, but it also serves another important function. Finding any negative months or years after it's been made can be a very difficult job unless you have a good filing system. Your negatives should remain in their storage envelopes and be kept in a 3-ring binder. You can purchase sticky strips that attach to the contact print and file them in the binder with the negatives. This will make it easier for you to locate what you're looking for. It might be even a good idea to buy some inexpensive dividers and group your negatives by date or by subject shot. You'll probably want to make an index of what you've got and give the negative envelope and the contact print the same reference number. Any system that works well for you is just fine. Of course, the main purpose of your contact proof sheet is to help you decide which, if any, of the negatives you'll want to make into larger prints. Using a magnifying glass, a China marker, and 2 pieces of L-shaped cardboard to determine cropping, it's now time to examine what you got. Working under a good reading light, examine all the prints thoroughly with the magnifying glass. Begin by eliminating any negatives that are out of focus or are ruined by a shaky camera. Also reject any shots that are over or underexposed. Look for shots that give you good contrast and tone, and also for the shots you like. Once you've chosen a shot that you feel would make a nice print, use the L-shaped cardboard to look at the composition of the print. Move the cards around in different sizes and areas. Change the format of the picture as you go. You may find that the negative will make a great print in its full size, or you may find that by cropping in slightly will give you what you're looking for. Whatever the result, when you got the best print cropping figured out, mark the cropping directly on the contact print with your China marker. Make your lines bold so you'll be able to see them for easy reference. Determining what you want to print now will save you time and print paper expense as we move on to the next step, making the enlargement. Let's stop for a moment and talk a little bit about the types of photographic paper you can choose from to make your print. There are basically 2 types of paper available. The conventional type of paper, which has been used for many years, is fiber-based paper. Many photographers prefer this paper because of the wide variety of surfaces and tonal qualities. Recently, however, the paper of choice for many professional photographers and amateurs is called RC paper. This stands for resin-coated paper. The resin layers act as a barrier to keep chemicals from seeping deep into the paper base. The contrast of your print can be changed by changing the contrast of the paper you used. Graded papers are available in different contrast grades, from 0 to 5. The higher the number, the more contrast in the paper. Normal negatives usually work best when printed on grade 2 paper. However, you have to buy a full box of each grade to give yourself a full range of contrast options. The way around this is to purchase variable contrast paper. Variable contrast paper gives you a full range of contrast options in a single box of photographic paper. You'll also need a set of variable contrast filters to use along with the paper. The filters are designed in half-grade increments, 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, and so on, up to 5. Paper is also available in a wide range of sizes, from 4 by 5 inches to 16 by 20 inches or larger. You'll probably find that you will initially need a box of 8 by 10 inch paper. This will work well for your contact prints as well as your first enlargements. I will be using an 8 by 10 sheet of grade 2 fiber-based paper for my enlargement. The equipment you'll need to make an enlargement is mostly the same as what you used for your contact print. In fact, your wet side will be identical. Prepare the chemicals in the same way you did for the contact print. Make sure everything is in its proper order and everything you don't need is safely put away. Wash your tongs and your stirring rod, and finally wash your hands and dry them completely. Now move to the dry side. This time, instead of your contact print frame or a piece of glass, you'll need your printing easel. You'll also need a soft brush to clean the negatives, tissue to clean the enlarger lens, and your focusing magnifier. You will usually focus and compose your print with the enlarger lens fully open to give you as much light as possible to see what you're doing. But you'll want to stop down just before you actually make your print. Unfortunately, I can't give you an exact method to figure out your correct f-stop. It's more something you'll learn over time. As you already know, with a smaller f-stop, less light will reach the print. If the negative you're using is very dense, or the image size you're making is very large, like an 11 by 14 inch print, you may want to keep the f-stop fairly open, say f5.6. A smaller enlargement or a very thin negative might work best at f11 or even f16. For a typical 8 by 10 print with a normal negative, you'll probably want to choose a mid-range f-stop, say f8. Some photographers choose to keep the f-stop standard and change the exposure time for any given print, and that's fine too. With some time in the darkroom, you'll learn what works best for you. Here's my strip with the negative I want to print. But before I put the strip into the negative carrier, I want to clean the negative. Any dust that is sitting on the film should be brushed away with a soft brush. A blower brush works very nicely for this purpose. Remember that the emulsion side is the dull side. Insert the negative, emulsion side down, into the carrier. Take one last look for any dust or dirt you might have missed. Place the carrier into the enlarger. Set your print easel to the size of print you'll be making, in our case an 8 by 10. Place the easel on the baseboard of your enlarger. Take a final look around the darkroom for anything that needs to be put away, because you're now going to be in safe light conditions. When you're ready, switch off the room light and turn on the safe light. Switch on the enlarger. With the lens fully open, compose the image according to the cropping you decided on your contact print. By moving your easel to the correct position and moving the enlarger head up and down until the image is in the right size. Now place the focusing magnifier on the printing easel and check the focus of your image by looking into the magnifier as you turn the focusing ring back and forth. On a small print, you may be able to adjust the focus just by looking at the image. But if there's any question about focus, use your magnifier. When you're sure you've found the correct focus, Stop the enlarger lens down to your selected f-stop and switch the enlarger off. To determine the correct exposure of your print, make a test strip the same way you did for the contact print. Place this test strip on the print easel and cover each fifth after 5 seconds exposure. After you've developed the test strip, you may want to even become more accurate with your timing. Say that you've determined that 15 seconds is not quite enough, but 20 is too much. Expose another test strip, but this time leave the entire piece exposed for 16 seconds. Then gradually cover the strip with a black card at 1 second intervals. This will give you a range of exposures at 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20 seconds. This new test strip will tell you exactly what the right exposure should be. If every exposure on your first test strip looks too light or too dark, open or close the lens accordingly and test again. I can tell from my test strip that 17 seconds is the exposure I want to use for my print. So now I'm ready to make the actual enlargement. Under the safe light, with the enlarger off, place a piece of photographic paper, emulsion side up, into the print easel. Move the red filter over the enlarging lens and switch the enlarger on to make sure that everything is correct with the positioning of your print. Now turn the enlarger off. Wait a few seconds and then move the safe filter away from the enlarger lens. Set the timer on your enlarger for the correct exposure time. In our case, 17 seconds is the correct exposure time. Now wait several seconds to let any vibrations you may have caused in the enlarger head have a chance to settle down. Switch on the enlarger and expose the print for the correct amount of time. Developing your print is exactly the same as you did for your contact print. Let's quickly review the process. Slip your print into the developer and rock the tray for the entire development time. Using tongs, move your print from the developer into the stop bath. Rock the tray of stop bath for a full 30 seconds. Now with a new pair of tongs, lift the paper from the stop bath. Place the print into the fixer and rock it constantly at first. Then for 5 seconds each minute through the rest of the fixing process. With a third pair of tongs, now move the print into the wash and allow it to wash the amount of time as indicated by the manufacturer's instructions. When the print is fully washed, remove the print from the wash and allow it to drain. Place the print, image side up, on a smooth, clean surface. Tilt it down so that it will drain into the sink. Now take a squeegee and with a light, even stroke, move the squeegee down the surface of the print to drain off the excess water. RC paper tends to dry best face up on a drying screen or blotter. Fiber-based papers tend to curl towards the emulsion side, so it's best to dry them image side down to reduce the curl. Also, RC papers will normally dry flat on their own, but fiber-based papers need a weight, like a book, set on top of them to remain flat while drying. Or with fiber-based papers, you may elect to use an electric type dryer. Now take a look at your handiwork. You'll probably feel very proud of yourself. But you may not realize that there's so much more you can do with black and white printing. Next, we will detail a wide variety of effects you can accomplish in printing. We'll also look at ways to get the most out of all of your negatives through different processing and printing techniques. Before going on to improving your printing techniques, review any portion of this program again and make sure you understand the basic printing techniques. We've got a lot more to learn, and I'm sure you'll find it fascinating, challenging, and above all else, fun. Understanding the basics of black and white darkroom techniques is important because it's a process, a step-by-step method, which is something you'll just have to learn and perfect. In straightforward processing and printing, there aren't too many ways to change what you're doing. Now that you've learned the basic techniques and you've hopefully had a chance to actually perform the process yourself, it's time to move on. And believe me, this is where the fun really starts.
There will be times when straight printing will not give you the best results, and when a few creative techniques will turn a good print into a great one. There are so many things you can do to change a print, more than we can possibly cover in this videotape. So what I'd like to do is give you some ideas and examples of advanced black and white techniques and start you thinking about ways to creatively improve your darkroom skills. Once you've evaluated your print and decided what you can do to alter it to make it a more pleasing product, you're ready to try some darkroom special effects. Let's start with dodging and burning. You'll need some special tools for this process. You can buy these tools at any photographic store, or they can be easily made in the darkroom. Dodging works by holding back light in certain areas of the print to allow that part of the print to be lighter. How light or how dark that area of the image ends up depends entirely on how long you dodge the print. The size of the dodged area depends on the size of the tool you use to dodge and how close it is to the paper. You can see the size of the dodge when you hold it between the enlarger and the baseboard. But how do you know how long to dodge? Use your test strip along with your original finished print to determine the correct exposure for the entire print and the exposure that will look best in the area you want to dodge. So when you're dodging, use these simple techniques. Move the dodging paddle around slightly during the entire dodging time to form the soft edge around the area you're lightening. Also move the handle slowly all around so it doesn't cast a shadow long enough in any one area to be seen in the final print. First, before you put a piece of photographic paper on the easel, project the image from the enlarger onto a piece of cardboard placed on the easel. Trace around the area you want to dodge. Then cut out the piece of cardboard, mount it on a wire, and use this as your dodging tool. If the area to be dodged is at the edge of the print, you can simply hold the cardboard in your hand. But if it's in the center of the image, you'll probably want to mount the cardboard tool on a piece of wire. Burning is the opposite of dodging. Burning is a technique used to darken specific areas of an image while holding light back from the rest of the image. Burning is normally done with a burn-in card, which consists of a piece of cardboard with a hole cut in the center. You can control the size of the burn with the size of the opening on the card and its distance from the photographic paper. As in dodging, to keep the burned area from having a hard, unnatural edge, the card should be moved slightly during the entire time of the burn. To determine the correct exposure time for the burn, use your test strip. Burning, like dodging, can be done with the irregular shapes in the cardboard. Again, project the image onto the cardboard and trace the area you want to burn. Using the cardboard with a cutout of your tracing, you can now burn in specific areas. You'll find many different things that can be achieved from burning and dodging. As you bring out certain areas of a photograph, you may find that you'll want to mix techniques to find exactly the right effect. The techniques of burning and dodging are used to an even greater extent in another special darkroom effect called vignetting. In this effect, only the center part of the image is printed, and the final image seems to fade to white or black around the edges. Here's an example of a vignetted print. In addition to using vignetting to create a mood, it is also a useful technique for eliminating distracting elements from around the main subject of the image. To make a vignette with a white background, you begin with a piece of cardboard with an oval cut out in the center. But instead of exposing all the print and then burning in the area that needs more exposure, you begin the exposure with the card in place and keep it there throughout. Move the card slightly during the exposure, which will soften the edges. Let's face facts. No matter how careful you are, no matter how controlled and clean your darkroom is, No matter how many times you've done this before, occasionally things don't turn out quite right. You need to learn from your mistakes, but in order to do that, you've got to understand what your mistakes are. First, let's look at the negative itself. A normal negative shows a good range of contrast and tones. You'll find many different shades of gray, and there will be strong light and dark areas. The emulsion should be clean of marks and scratches, and you shouldn't find any fogging or streaking on the film. If your negative shows anything different than these conditions, you've got a problem. Instead of just throwing the negative in the waste bin, examine the negative to find out what went wrong. You need to learn how to tell the difference between exposure problems and development problems. The easiest way to tell if the problems in a negative are exposure or development is to look at the edge markings. If your negatives show poor contrast or detail, or looks thin or weak, examine the edge markings. If the edges appear normal, your problem is under exposure, and you'll just have to learn to adjust for that when you're shooting. However, if the negative looks soft with very little contrast, and the edge markings look pale and weak too, your problem is probably under development. Check to see that you follow the time and temperature instructions for your development solution. Developer cannot work effectively at temperatures lower than 68 degrees, so always be careful. Also check the dilution and the age of the developer. There are similar differences between overexposed negatives and overdeveloped ones. The key symptom is again the edge markings. If you discover that your film was overdeveloped, you must be careful to leave the developer in the tank for the exact amount of time, then pour the stop bath in immediately. Exposure versus development problems with prints are not quite so easy to identify, but you can easily tell that something isn't right and adjust your process to achieve a better print. There's not too much excuse for exposure problems in your print as long as you are religious about making test strips. You should make a test strip each time you are making a print. However, if your exposure time is already very short or very long, you should try opening or closing the lens one stop and making the test strip again. If you are absolutely certain that you've used the correct exposure time and your print still looks too light or too dark, the problem is probably over or under development. Remember, if your developer is the wrong temperature, your development time will not be correct. Keeping careful watch over the development temperature and time will result in consistently better prints. Besides exposure problems in negatives and prints, you will probably, through the course of time, experience other negative and print faults. There are other problems that can occur with your film. For the most part, keeping careful track of development times, chemical ages, and chemical temperatures will eliminate problems. But you must also maintain good, clean darkroom methods and never take anything for granted. Strict, controlled techniques will produce the best possible quality levels. You will also encounter print faults from time to time. In addition to exposure problems, as we've already discussed, you may come across a variety of other problems. Let's take a look at a few of these now. White marks on your print, especially marks that look like fingerprints, are caused by contamination of the paper by the fixer. Don't touch any paper unless your hands are clean. If you have to touch the fixer, remember to wash and dry your hands thoroughly before touching anything else. Of course, it's best not to touch the fixer at all. That's why tongs are such an important tool in your darkroom. If you're having focusing problems in only part of your image, your negative may not be laying flat in the carrier. A glass carrier can solve most of these problems. Make certain that your negative is not getting too hot, as too much heat can cause it to warp in the middle and bring it out of focus. To arrive at a good quality finished print, There's just no substitute for a good negative. There's a lot to remember at first, but after a while the things that seem difficult will become routine. Remember to look for things that make a negative good. A full range of tones. Shadows and borders are free from fogging. Good detail in the shadows and highlights. A clean, unmarked, even appearance in the emulsion. A good print is usually judged by a couple of points. The grain of the negative is sharp and crisp throughout the entire image, and the print has a full range of tones. You should find in the print the blackest black your paper is capable of printing, as well as the purest white. You should also find a full range of tones between, with every possible shade of gray imaginable. I have a rule of thumb I like to use when looking at prints and negatives. Don't ever settle for less than the best you can get. If it takes you several tries to get the perfect print, that's perfectly okay. In fact, it's pretty normal. There aren't too many professional photographers out there who hit a prize winner in the first attempt. Don't get discouraged. Now you know what to look for in a great print, and you'll get better and better with time and practice in your own darkroom. A black and white darkroom can give you years of enjoyment. You'll probably find yourself going back to negatives you haven't even thought of in a very long time, just to see what special effects you can create with them. Old shots will have new life because of all the new techniques you've developed. Now that you're a pro in black and white developing and printing, the natural move is to begin looking at the color process. In our next chapter, we'll take an overall look at color film processing and printing. Many of the techniques used in color are similar to what you've learned in black and white, while some are quite different. But you shouldn't shy away just because it's color film. It's still just a process and one that you can learn and enjoy. You now have a good general understanding of darkroom techniques for black and white processing and printing. As we move into the world of color, you'll be pleased to learn that the equipment you need for processing color is essentially the same. The process used for developing color film is similar, using different chemicals, and in some cases a few more steps. The major difference between color and black and white come in the printing stages. Before we jump into the color darkroom, let's talk a little bit about color film. There are two types of color film, color negative film and color positive or slide film. Both types of film have 3 layers of emulsions. Each layer is sensitive to certain primary colors. The first layer on the film base is sensitive to red, the second layer to green, and the top layer to blue. All colors of the spectrum are created by combinations of these 3 primary colors. Images recorded on these layers of emulsion appear as complementary colors. A red subject will appear as cyan on the red sensitive layer. On the green sensitive layer, green subjects appear to be magenta. A blue subject will appear on the blue sensitive layer as yellow. On color negative film, you will see the complementary color when the film is developed. In other words, you'll see the colors opposite to those of the original image. Color positive slide film goes through an additional step in processing that reverses the colors back to their primaries, so that when you look at the color slide, you see the true colors as they appeared when the subject was photographed. The most important thing to remember in color film processing is that with certain kinds of chemicals, you cannot even ignore a half a degree change in temperature of the chemical. And you have to include the time it takes to pour a chemical out of the development tank into that chemical's timing. Color film is much more sensitive than black and white, so timings and temperatures must be absolutely accurate. We'll begin by examining the process of developing color negative film. Color negative film is a little easier to develop than color slide film because it involves fewer steps and chemicals. Although the equipment is essentially the same as for black and white, there are a couple of points you should know. First of all, a lot of photographers prefer using a plastic tank
for color film processing. I personally still use my stainless steel tank and my plastic lid. Another possible equipment change is your thermometer. A thermometer that was good enough for black and white chemistry may not be sufficient for color, since there's not as much room for leeway in temperatures for color processing. You should really use a mercury thermometer because of its extreme accuracy. If you do a great deal of color work, it's a good idea to invest in a tempering unit to ensure color temperature control. At the very least, you'll want to use a water bath to control the temperatures of your chemicals before and during use. Obviously, if you can afford it, you should use completely different containers for your color and black and white chemicals. Color chemicals are very strong and they can easily contaminate the containers you use for black and white. If you must use the same containers, you need to take the time to thoroughly wash each piece of equipment. Here's a list of the equipment you'll need for processing color films. A film processing tank and reel, a graduate for measuring chemicals, a tray for the water bath, a precision thermometer, funnels, scissors, a film canister opener such as a bottle opener, film clips, and rubber gloves. An additional piece of equipment that is not really essential but would really make your life easier is a tray warmer. You will put your water bath tray on the warmer to control the temperature of the water in the bath. If you do not use a tray warmer, you will need to constantly check the temperature of the bath and add more hot water as the temperature falls. Color negative processing chemicals come in kits, such as Kodak's C41 process, Bestler's CN2, or Unicolor K2. Some independent manufacturers also market C41 kits. The majority of color negative films such as Kodak, Fuji, Konica, and some Agfa films can be processed with these chemicals. Developing color negative film involves from 3 to 8 steps, depending on the processing kit you use. We'll be using the Bestler CN2 chemicals, using a 3-step process. Obviously, it's very important to read and understand the instructions that come with the particular kit you use. In the Bestler CN2 process, you'll find that the chemicals must be kept at a high working temperature, 75 degrees, 86 degrees, or 100 degrees. Therefore, the water bath is an important part of the processing. The higher the temperature, the shorter the development time. So timing is critical. The CN2 kit provides chemicals in liquid form. Other kits include chemicals in powder, liquid, or a combination of the two. No matter what kit you choose, mix your chemicals carefully according to the directions. Some of the chemicals will be mixed in parts. You must mix each part thoroughly before you add the next, and never add more than one chemical part at a time. Always wear rubber gloves when mixing color chemicals and when processing film or prints. The film is loaded on the reel in exactly the same way you learned to load black and white film. Make sure that you keep your fingers off the film's emulsion. Remember, anything you had to be careful of in black and white processing is even more important in color processing because of the film's sensitivity. In step 1 of the CN2 process, you will agitate the tank for the first 15 seconds, and then once every 15 seconds thereafter. The length of time from step 1 will range from 16 minutes down to 3 minutes 15 seconds, depending on the temperature you're using. Follow the same agitation process for step 2. Again, checking the timing according to your temperature settings. Next, you'll wash the film, using water at the same temperature as your chemicals. It's best to use running water at this stage, but you can also change the water every 30 seconds while constantly agitating the tank. Step 3, the final step, takes 1 minute no matter which temperature you're using. You'll agitate the tank during the first 15 seconds only. If you're using a process other than CN2, such as Kodak C41, you may find that you have an intermediate bath step and wash step between the developer and bleach. And some C41 processes by independent manufacturers combine the bleach and fix steps. So it's very important to not only use the correct processing kit for the film you use, but to carefully follow the instructions that come with your kit. Developing color positive or slide film is a little more complicated than color negative film, but you shouldn't shy away from it just because of that. Color slide film involves two significant extra steps. As you know, color negative film goes directly into the color developer, which forms colored dyes in the exposed part of the image. But color slide film is first developed to give a black and white negative image. The black and white image is then reversed to a positive before it can be color developed. This is why sometimes you hear color positive film referred to as reversal film. In color slide processing, there are two possible ways to accomplish this reversal. In the processing method called E6, the reversal is achieved chemically with a solution called reversal bath. The slide developing process called P41 is a little more complicated. To achieve the reversal using this method, the film is briefly removed from the tank and fogged by white light. Temperature and timing are even more critical in color slide developing than they were for color negatives. The simple truth is that your color slide is the finished product, and you don't have as much room for corrections as you do when you print from a color negative. You need to begin with the same equipment that we discussed for color negative processing. However, I don't think that you'll want to consider a tray warmer as an optional piece of equipment. Controlling temperatures to within a half a degree fluctuation is critical to the development process. Let's walk through the Bessler CS6 process. Of course, begin by carefully mixing your chemical solutions. Place the containers of chemicals in water bath of 86, 93, 100, or 108 degrees, and let them come to the correct processing temperature. Stabilize the temperature of chemicals by adding hot or cold water to the bath. Consult carefully the instructions that come with your processing kit for instructions on chemical mixing as well as processing times and temperature ranges. To really give your slides the most protection possible, you may want to use glass mounts. The sprocket holes of your film fits onto pegs, and then the mount snaps shut. Glass mounts are a little tricky to keep clean. You should clean the mount thoroughly inside and out using a soft, lint-free cloth before placing your film in it. There are also plastic and cardboard mounts for your slides. Using plastic slide mounts, you can just slip the film chip in, while on cardboard slide mounts, you may have to heat seal them. Printing color enlargements today is certainly not as difficult and complicated as it used to be. In fact, the development process has become improved so much that printing is as quick and almost as easy as black and white. Color prints are processed in a light-tight drum instead of development trays, so the entire development process can be done in normal room lighting. Printing from color negatives is different than printing from color slides. Different steps, different chemistry. We'll start by learning the techniques and steps involved in printing from your color negative. There is one big difference between making color prints and making black and white prints. Not only are you controlling the density of the print by exposure, you must also control the color balance of the print. The white light projected from your enlarger is actually made up of almost equal parts of red, green, and blue light. To control the color balance of your print, you must control the amount of each colored light which strikes your paper. This is achieved by using filters to change the amount of colored light coming from your enlarger. To control the light which hits your photographic paper, you'll use a method called subtractive filtration. Color photographic paper has 3 layers of emulsion, just like your color film, each sensitive to different primary colors. Subtractive filtrations controls the amount of red, green, and blue light which reaches your photographic paper simultaneously. Yellow, magenta, or cyan filters are placed in the light path between the enlarger and the paper. These filters come in a range of density to control the degree of color bias in the prints. The filters can be purchased as filter packs made from acetate, which are inserted into a drawer in the enlarger head, or if you're using an enlarger designed to make color prints, you will have filter wheels built into the head itself. You will never use more than 2 of the filter colors together, because all 3 colors combine to make gray. As with black and white printing, the first step is to test for exposure. You should always get your exposure set for the correct density, then begin making your adjustments for color balance. To make sure your enlarger light is roughly the right color, you should select the basic filter pack or dial-in filter settings provided within the printing paper. This will vary according to the film paper combination. If you already have an enlarger that you've been using for black and white printing, you should be all set. Most enlargers are fitted with filter drawers in the lamp house. All you will need is a set of filters in the correct size for your enlarger. To convert the white light to the colored light, you should purchase a set of filters in various densities of yellow, magenta, and cyan. You will also need a UV or ultraviolet filter, which must be used with every filter combination. If you're using a filter pack that sits in your enlarger drawer, make sure to make up the correct color pack with as few filters as possible. Bessler has come up with a way to make filtration for color printing very easy. This unit is called a dual dichro S. It mounts right on the top of the enlarger head and can be operated as a diffusion or condenser system. Now you simply dial in the filtration for your particular color print. In addition to a color enlarger or an enlarger filter pack combination, there is another main piece of equipment you'll need for color printing. This is the color processing drum. These are available in different sizes, and as an initial investment, you should purchase a drum no larger than the biggest prints you'll normally make. The drum is loaded with exposed photographic paper in the dark and fitted with a light tight cap. All processing then can be carried out in normal room light. You will agitate the drum by rolling it back and forth on your countertop, or you can purchase a motorized unit which will do the agitation for you. Color processing drums use very small amount of chemistry for processing your prints, so you should check the instructions that come with your drum to find the correct amount. Generally, the amount used will be about 1 3/4 fluid ounces. All color papers consist of 3 layers of emulsion, each sensitive to a different primary color. As with black and white papers, resin-coated color papers absorb a very small amount of chemical solutions and dry very quickly. Polyethylene-coated papers, known as PE papers, have the same qualities as RC papers. When you're looking for color papers, you won't find the wide selection that you did for black and white because there aren't too many manufacturers that make color paper. Whichever color paper you decide to try, make sure to purchase a compatible color processing kit. There is only one weight in color paper, medium. The finish, however, can be lustrous, glossy, or silk. You will probably be most happy with 8x10 sheets of paper to begin with, because you can cut them in half to accommodate 2 5x7 prints. The one thing to remember about color papers is that they deteriorate in heat. You should always store color papers in the refrigerator. But remember to take the packet of paper out of the refrigerator 3 hours before you intend to print on it to avoid condensation on the print surface. The color chemicals you purchase must be compatible with the paper you've chosen. Many manufacturers provide liquid concentrate chemicals in their kits, but you will find that some come in the form of powders. Whichever kit you decide to use, be sure to mix the chemicals in exact order and amounts as indicated in your kit's instructions. Make sure that each chemical is completely dissolved before you add the next. A recent breakthrough in color chemistry has made a two-step process available for processing color prints from negatives. This kit, called a two-step for color prints, is made by Bessler. The chemicals come in all liquid form and can be used at temperatures as low as 66 degrees. You vary the time according to the temperature of the chemicals. These chemicals work well whether you're using a motorized processor or developing the prints in a drum or open trays. With all your chemicals mixed and ready, your color processing equipment close by, your paper handy, and your enlarger set with the basic filter pack suggested for your type of paper, you can now make a color enlargement. Begin by dusting your chosen negative and placing it in the negative carrier, emulsion side down, that's shiny side up. A special note here, if you don't have a safe light that's specially designed for color printing, you'll perform the rest of the steps in total darkness. With the enlarger lens fully open, turn the room lights off and the enlarger on. Focus the image on your baseboard in the normal manner. When the image is focused, close down to F11 and switch off the enlarger. In total darkness, place a sheet of print paper in your printing easel. Make a test strip of exposures in the same way you did for black and white printing. Cover 1/5 of the card every 5 seconds, up to a total of 25 seconds. Turn the enlarger off. There's another way of making a test print that will save you time and effort in determining the correct exposure and filtration. This is called the Bessler Universal Calculator. It's inexpensive and allows you to determine the correct exposure and filtration with a single test print. If you're using a color processing drum, take your piece of paper and give it a gentle curve. Load it into the processing drum with the emulsion side facing inward. Seal the drum tightly. Before you turn on room lights, check to make sure that there's no unexposed printing paper laying out. Switch on the room lights. Now you're ready to process your test print. We will develop our test print using the two-step liquid chemicals by Bessler. You will pour step 1 chemicals and agitate the drum according to the temperature and times you're using. This step will take from 1 to 10 minutes. Step 2 follows in the same manner and will take 1 to 3 minutes, depending on the temperature. You will finish up with a water wash, which will take from 3 to 5 minutes. Let's now examine the test print. We can see that the correct exposure time is between 15 and 20 seconds. But we can also see that the color is not quite right. It's very rare that the starting filtration gives a perfect color balance. Usually the first test print has a slight cast. So the next step is to find what adjustments will eliminate the incorrect color cast. This means making another test print, this time giving a range of filter combinations or settings rather than exposure times. Here's a rule of thumb that you can use to correct for color bias. Add filters of the same color as the bias or remove filters of the complementary color. For example, if your test print shows a strong cyan bias, you may want to try adding about 20 units of cyan to the filtration. Your next step is to make a variety of filter packs or settings and test some different color combinations to correct the final print. As with so many darkroom procedures, color correction requires trial and error. But after some practice, you can get to where you can very closely judge the necessary color correction on the first attempt. Color prints can also be made from slides. It used to be that color slides had to be made into a negative image before they can be enlarged onto a color print. This step was called an inner negative. Now it's just as easy to print the slide directly onto color photographic paper. There are several advantages to printing a slide instead of a negative. First of all, since you're printing from a positive image, you have a great reference image to check the color and exposure of your final print. Reversal paper is much more tolerant of variations in color and exposure than printing paper used with negatives. Also, by utilizing one type of slide film and one type of reversal paper, you probably won't have to spend a lot of time testing after your first print has been successfully made, since you can see the positive image before you print it. You can adjust it for some variations before you even begin your printing process. However, there's one disadvantage to printing from a colored slide. A colored slide can handle a much wider brightness range than a print because the slide is viewed by transmitted light rather than reflected light. You will almost certainly lose some color saturation in your print. Choose which slide you intend to print from carefully, keeping this handicap in mind. The only piece of equipment that is different in printing from a color slide than a color negative is a specialized negative carrier which will hold the slide in its mount. The less you have to actually hold the film or the slide, the better. So obviously a negative carrier will hold the slide in its mount will make your life much simpler. As far as the chemicals, it should already be clear to you that you'll need some special processing chemicals for either reversal paper or Sebrachrome. The paper and processing kit you choose will give you specific instructions for exposure, basic filtration, and development times. Whether you're printing in black and white or in color, you put a lot into your finished prints. Your time, your effort, your imagination. You should take a little more time and create ways to show your prints in the best possible way. The way you choose to mount and show your work will depend a great deal on your personal preference. Here are a few tried and true suggestions of ways to really finish your prints. Dust spots that appear on the final print are the most common and fortunately the easiest to fix. Dark spots take a little more work but can be taken care of. The process of eliminating spots on the final print is called spotting. There's one thing to remember. Too much spotting can leave the print looking worse than when you started. So you want to be careful to do just enough spotting to eliminate the offending spot. Eliminating little white specks and smudges is done by darkening them with a dye which is applied to the surface of the print. Large light-colored rings on the print may be caused by water spots that have settled on the negative. These can be spotted, but it may work better to rewash the negative and make another print. The trick when spotting is to match the darkness and the color of the area surrounding the print. Mix the dye in a white dish so you can see the dye's color clearly, and use a tiny paintbrush with a very small tip to apply the dye to the print. You should work under a bright light and use a magnifying glass if necessary. Remember, it's a lot easier to add more dye than to take it off. So work in several thin coats rather than starting with one thick coat. And remember too, that the dye will look slightly darker when it's dry. So apply the coat sparingly until the dye is slightly lighter than its neighboring areas. Lightening a dark spot is a little tougher. You've got 3 ways to go about this. The first is to etch them off. Using a single-edged razor blade or an X-Acto knife, take off a thin layer of the emulsion and try to eliminate the spot. Practice on a scrap print first. You may want to try bleaching out the spot. Photographic bleaches can be mixed to achieve different effects, so read the manufacturer's directions before mixing. Choosing the way you want to mount your finished print depends a great deal on the style of photograph and where you're going to display it. There are several ways to mount your finished print that will give you a very nice finished look. You may find that time seems to fly past when you're in the darkroom. You'll miss meals and phone calls, but you'll love every second of it. As you make more and more prints, you'll learn new systems and new effects that we haven't even discussed here. That's because darkroom techniques are as unique as the person who's performing them. And each photograph you make will be as individual as your fingerprint. Don't be afraid to experiment in your darkroom. It's the only way you'll learn. Display your prints proudly, knowing from start to finish they are completely yours. Most of all, have fun. Your darkroom should be a place where you can learn new methods while expressing your creativity. I'm Brian Ratty. Enjoy your darkroom. That's just great. That's super. Thanks, Lori. I'll be right back. Hi, I'm Brian Ratty, and for over 25 years, photography has been my profession. Making pictures has been very good to me. I've traveled most of the world photographing people, places, and things. Over the years, I've developed a deep respect for other photographers and for people who wish to improve their communication skills through better photography. A few years ago, we began developing the On Assignment video series for photographers. Today, this award-winning series can be found in 20 countries in 6 different languages throughout the world. These videos are packed with easy-to-understand information on how you can improve your photography. There are literally hundreds of tips, secrets, and illustrations on better photographic technique. Let me share with you what has taken me 25 years to learn. I hope you'll get an opportunity to view one of our video programs in the very near future. Here are just a few of the subjects covered within the On Assignment video series.